I am on our new geometry packet. So we just did right triangles with Pythagorean theorem and SOHCAHTOA. And now we are going to continue getting ready for geometry next year. And a big topic in geometry next year is the midpoint and distance formula. So that's what this packet's about. First, I have another review set, so you will have a quiz later on this week, a review set quiz over these 4 questions. I have them worked out here, so you can go ahead and pause and work them out yourself and check your answers. Just to kind of go over a little, some key things though. This is all solving inequalities, which we did back in September. This will get you ready for your final exam this year. In this first one, I flipped the sign because I divided by a negative number, if you remember that rule. We had 2 types of compound inequalities. We had or and then we had and. Or has the word or in it, and does not, so that's how you know the difference. When it's an or, you just solve each one separately and you have your 2 answers. When it's an and, the part that's in the middle of your 2 inequality signs, that's what you're solving for. So I started by adding 1 to both sides and I got this. And then I went ahead and divided 2 by everything, because once you're left with just x in the middle of your 2 signs, x is by itself and you solved it. So this is your final answer. That's usually a common question I get on the final exam. A lot of students forget how to solve that type of inequality. And the last one, they give you an equation of y equals mx plus b and ask what's the slope and the y-intercept. The slope would be 5/1. The y-intercept would be 2. So again, let me know if you have questions on the review set, but this is what it'll be on later this week. I think either like Wednesday or Thursday. Okay, so let's jump into some geometry stuff. So we are doing the distance formula, which I'll go ahead and give it to you right now. Obviously, since it's online, you'll be able to use this on your test. And I believe in geometry next year, they'll give you this formula too, because it's on the air test. But anyways, this is the distance formula. It's the square root, and you have all this stuff on the inside. Now, you should be familiar with x1 and y1 and x2 and y2, because we've done that before this year in like our slope formula. You use this a lot in geometry when it comes to obviously finding the distance, but also find the length of a side of a shape, like a rectangle or a square or a kite. So that's where it like is applied. But these first 2 examples, we're literally just gonna plug it in though and find the distance. So the first thing you do is label. Here's my first x, my first y, second x, second y. Again, take the time to label, it'll help you. You could have it reversed. You could have this be x2, y2, and this one be x1, y1, but the 1's have to go together and the 2's have to go together. Now, if I want to plug it into my distance formula, x2, which is 4, minus, this is the important part, people forget this part, minus from the formula x1. x1 is 3, then y2, which is -1, minus from the formula y1, which is -2. This is why that's important, because a lot of people forget that minus from the formula and they would just put -2 here, but that's not correct. It's minus a -2, which that'll turn into a plus. So that does change your answer. So if I simplify this a little bit, 4 minus 3 is 1, 1 squared is 1, and this is now -1 plus 2. Well, -1 plus 2 is 1, and 1 squared is 1 again. And then that'll give me the square root of 2, because 1 plus 1 is 2. Now, I do want you to actually solve this. So you can put in the Desmos, which I'm going to do right here. Just do the square root of 2. And just round to the nearest tenth, let's say. So I got 1.4. So there's the distance for number 1. So I'm going to do the same thing in number 2. I'm going to label x1, y1, x2, y2, and I'm going to go ahead and just plug it in. x2 is 6, minus from the formula x1, which is 4. y2 is 2. minus from the formula y1, which is -2. So again, that's going to change things. You got to be careful with that. So now if I simplify this, 6 minus 4 is 2. 2 squared is 4. And it's order of operations. Let's keep that in mind. You have to do what's inside parentheses first and then square it. So you have to do 6 minus 4 and get 2, and then square it and get 4. Then over here, this is going to turn to a plus. So it's 2 plus 2, which is 4, and 4 squared is 16. If I add those together, I get 20. And then, like I said, I do want you to take the square root and round to the nearest tenth. So the square root of 20 is 4.5. Okay, so now that's just like the idea of using the distance formula. Now I'm going to do a geometry question where this is where you'll use it next year. So it says the coordinates of the vertices, that's your points, that's what vertices mean, it's your x and y, of a quadrilateral, that's a shape with 4 sides. So you could say it's a rectangle, a square, so a quadrilateral is. They give you the sides R, S, T, and U with the following points, and it says find the perimeter, and then round to the nearest tenth. So let's just assume it's a rectangle. I'm going to label it. It doesn't matter where you start. Like I'm going to start here, R, but it has to go in the order. So it has to go R, S, T, U. Or you could have done R, S, T, U. You could have done it the other way, but it has to go in the order. You can't do R and then T and then U. It has to go in the order that you have it written here. So those are my sides of my rectangle, let's say. I'm just assuming it's a rectangle. It tells me it's a quadrilateral. And I'm going to find the perimeter. Well, the perimeter is when you add up all the sides. Well, I don't know what the sides are. That's what I have to solve. So you want to start off by using the distance formula. Now we're going to have to do it quite a few times because I got to find technically the distance of 4 sides. Once I find those 4 sides, I add them all together and that'll be my perimeter. So let's start with the side RS. So R is -1, 3, and S is 3, 3. I'm just getting these points right here. So I'm going to use the distance formula. That gives me the length of that side. So if I plug into the distance formula, I'm going to label x1, y1, x2, y2. X2 is 3 minus from the formula, x1, which is -1. So I gotta be careful in how I write that because it's gonna turn to a plus. Y2 is 3 minus from the formula y1, which is also 3. Okay, well this first one's gonna turn to a plus. So 3 plus 1 is 4, 4 squared is 16. 3 minus 3 is 0, and 0 squared is 0. So that's the square root of 16, which comes out to be a nice pretty number of 4. So I'm gonna label that right there. It helps to draw out a picture to visualize it. So the side RS is 4. Now let's do ST. So S is 3, 3. And I said ST, right? ST, yep, is 5, -1. And I'm going to do the distance formula again. So D equals, okay. So plugging it in, I have x2, which is 5, minus from the formula x1, which is 3. Then I have y2, which is -1, minus from the formula y1, which is also 3. I'm going to simplify this. 5 minus 3 is 2. 2 squared is 4. -1 minus 3 is -4. -4 squared is positive 16. So be careful with that. Anything squared is positive because you have it in parentheses here. So if you use your calculator, you gotta make sure you have parentheses, you're gonna get the wrong answer. -1 minus 3 is -4. -4 squared is positive 16. So this gives me the square root of 20 again, which we did up here, and that's 4.5. So that's the length of this side, 4.5. Now let's do the length of UT. So U is -2, -1, and it's UT, right? Yep, so T is 5, -1. kind of running out of space here, so I'm kind of squeezing it in. Okay, so I'm plugging that into the distance formula. X2 is 5 minus x1, which is -2. Y2 is -1 minus, oh, this should be a 1 here. There we go. My apologies. Y2 is -1 minus a -1 again. Okay, let me just make sure I didn't make any mistakes. 5 minus -2, we're good there, and then -1 minus -1. Okay, so this turns into a plus. 5 plus 2 is 7. 7 squared is 49. Over here it turns into a plus. Let's see, -1 plus 1 is 0. 0 squared is 0. So that's the square root of 49, which comes out to be 7. So this side is 7. Now I can already tell it's not a rectangle. Again, I just assumed it was a rectangle so I could draw a picture, but it's not because these would have to be the same length for a rectangle. So, but I'm going to keep going. I have my last one to solve for is RU. R is -1, 3. U is -2, -1. Plugging it into my distance formula, I have x2, which is -2, minus from the formula x1, which is -1. Then I have y2, which is -1, minus y1, which is 3. That will turn into a plus there. So -2 plus 1 is -1. -1 squared is +1. Anything squared is positive. -1 minus 3 is -4. And again, -4 squared is going to be +16. Because anything squared is positive. So that gives me the square root of 17, which, let's figure out what that is. 4.1. So 4.1. So that's the length of my fourth and final side. Okay. So we had to do the distance formula. It was tedious. That's how it is in geometry. Sorry to tell you. But we had to do the distance formula 4 different times to find out what the length of all 4 sides are. Again, it's a quadrilateral. That's a shape with 4 sides. I just drew a rectangle just to give us a visual. It's not a rectangle, obviously, because a rectangle would have to have the opposite sides the same length. But now I can answer the question. It says find the perimeter. The perimeter is when you add up all 4 sides. So you need to add up 4.1 plus 4 plus 4.5 plus, what is it, 7? Yep. 19.6. So that is, and it said round to the nearest tenth, which I did, and that is the perimeter of that quadrilateral. So that's how you'll use it in geometry next year. I have an extra page on here in case you want some extra practice. This next one's with a kite. So it says find the perimeter again, so you're gonna have to do the distance formula 4 times to find the length of all 4 sides. Add them all together to get your perimeter. This one you just find the distance between the 2 points, so you just have to use the distance formula 1 time. Email me with any questions. Again, the hardest question is this last one because it's tedious, but the main thing is that you're plugging it into the formula correctly. You're taking the time to label and be slow, and for the most part, as long as you take your time, you should be okay.